All right. All right. We're going to go ahead and let people come in. Welcome back to the Frontline Strong Together live webinar series. This is the series where we come together and bring you first responders and community members throughout the state of Michigan to talk about subjects that are important for first responders and their family. I am your host, and Manisha Leary. I am the program manager for Frontline Strong Together. And my co-host is Kobe Taylor. He just went away for a little bit. He is one of the FST5 peers in the Traverse Cities area. He's amazing trainer and firefighter first responder, in addition to a peer support team member on his peer support team. So Kobe and I, every month, will come to you guys rocking out with our amazing guest, learning and exploring and talking about things that are near and dear to our first responder world. So a little housekeeping, as you guys know, before we get started. Frontline Strong Together is a program that takes care of first responders and their families, and we focus on law enforcement, firefighters, 911 dispatch, corrections, and EMS throughout the state of Michigan. That means covering all 83 counties in the state of Michigan, and learning and building to do so much more for our state. Our goal is to make sure that we are addressing mental health and behavioral health needs for all of our first responders and their families. And that includes having a 24/7, 365 crisis and resource line. That number is 833-34-STRONG. You can call that number and you can get crisis, resources, anything that you need. You can talk to first responders. You can just get through whatever it is that you may need to do in that day, whether it's resources or talk to somebody directly about things that are going on. And if you are looking for more of a online or kind of a website type space to get your resources, visit us at www.fst5.org. Again, that's www.fst5.org, where you can find all of our podcasts, webinars, resources there. You can also go on and take quizzes that may be able to help you explore some of the symptoms that you may be feeling. Any anxiety, depression. If you think you're suffering from PTSD, you can find all of those things in addition to peer support teams and providers on our website. Okay. So I am super excited today to briefly introduce. I'll hand it over to my co-host shortly to give you guys a longer introduction. But today we are going to be joined by Ashley Freeman. We're super excited because Ashley is not only a friend of FST5's, but she is an amazing first responder with an amazing story of resiliency and processing her grief, because that is the title of our webinar today is processing grief as a first responder. So she's going to tell us a little bit about her story and how she's gone from where she was when she was going through her grief to where she is now. And if you guys have been a follower of our podcast, Ashley recently was on our podcast, and it is one of the highest views webinar or podcasts that we have. Her children thinks that she's YouTube famous. So I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna tell everybody that Ashley is YouTube famous now. And we're even more so lucky to have Ashley today because today's her birthday. So happy birthday, Ashley. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here on your birthday and speak to our group, our team, to talk about grief as first responder, because this is a really big topic for us. Okay. Kobe, is there more introduction that you want to give about the amazing Ashley?
No, I think she's doing a phenomenal job. She's part of my team and does an excellent job. I'm just excited we're back doing webinars and welcome everyone back to them. We're going to keep them going every month. So I appreciate everyone jumping on here. And this is recorded. So if you miss it, we'll be sure to share that. Watch for it. And thank you again.
Absolutely. And just before we get started, to all of our guests who are our listeners who are on today, please put your questions or any comments that you may have in our Q&A or into our chat. So both those boxes should be working. Again, you can put it in the Q&A or into the chat. If you decide to use the Q&A, you will have an option to do it anonymously, where you don't have to share your name or any information like that. And we will make sure that we read off the questions for Ashley to answer at the end of her presentation. Okay. All right, Ashley, you have the floor. Let's get started.
Hi guys. So thanks for having me again. I really enjoyed being on the podcast and being able to share and I'm excited to do it on this webinar. Um so here we go. I made a PowerPoint for it, so everyone has something to look at while they listen. If I can get it to work. There we go. So like Manisha and Kobe said, my name's Ashley. I've been an EMT for 6.5 years. I'm a generational EMS professional. I've worked in both rural and urban environments, with most of my experience being in an urban environment in Detroit. I'm also a senior at Wayne State. I am in the process of obtaining my bachelor's degree in social work with a plan to obtain my master's degree in social work. With this, I aim to be a therapist who specializes in first responders. This is a little picture of my family. I got my 3 kids there. Like I said, I grew up in the EMS environment. My dad started in EMS. His wife was also a supply tech for that company. She went on to get her EMT license and was also a dispatcher. So on the weekends, when my dad and his wife both had worked, the company let my 3 sisters and I come and hang out in the office while they worked. The company was kind of small then, so that was pretty cool. Parents didn't have to look for a sitter for those long shifts. So I knew that I wanted to be a paramedic from a very, very early age. I wanted to work in the back of an ambulance, just like my dad. Um, I loved being able to help in any way when we were there on the weekends. So I would help stock the trucks and I would get the non-rebreathers and the nasal cannulas, and I knew what those were. And I thought I was the coolest kid because I knew how to fill an oxygen tank. And I was like, only grown-ups get to do this. How cool am I that I know what this is and I know how to fill it? I really enjoyed being able to help in any way and participate in those. So that was really cool. So like I said, I wanted to be just like my dad. Um, I looked up to him in everything that he did. We ended up joining a volunteer organization when I was a teenager. This picture here is us at that organization. I was pinning him with his new rank, and you can see I had the biggest smile on my face, being able to be right next to my dad and being able to do what he does just like him. Um, when I was younger, we used to play paramedic instead of like Tea Party or Barbies. Um, and I wouldn't know what to do. So my dad would be like sitting there on the couch and he'd like whisper what to do. So he'd say, "Oh, check my pulse." And so I would try and check his pulse. He'd be like, "Okay, you have a pulse. What do you do next?" And it was really fun being able to play my dream career with him. I remember watching all the first responder shows on the TV with him. I couldn't wait till I was going to be able to work in an ambulance with him too. So when I was 21, I realized that I was ready to start my career. This is my dad on the screen. Um, I had always dreamed of working in the back of that ambulance, and that's what I was prepared to do. I was ready. My dad's ambulance company was holding an EMT class. So he talked to the instructor, and of course, I got a spot right away. I didn't even have to do the interview or nothing. I got put right on that list, which was awesome. Um, my dad and I talked about how I was going to do my third eyes with him. We talked about getting to be partners one day and running calls because he was a paramedic and I would be an EMT and it would be perfect. I was living with him at the time, so we could just ride to work together and reminisce about calls and be there for each other. And it was something I was really looking forward to. We joked about me accidentally calling him dad in front of patients. Um, we had plans and we had big dreams, and I was going to do all of it with him by his side, him by mine, our thing together. And then in January 4th, 2013, sorry. So on January 4th,
Okay, take your time.
2013, um, everything changed. That's the day that my dad committed suicide. Um, and I was devastated. I just lost my dad, but I also lost my mentor for this fantastic career that I was going to start. Um, and I was going to start with him by my side, being able to do that with him. Um, my last conversation with my dad that night, um, was about how I was going to get ready for the class and what I needed to get. And he told me the stethoscope I needed to buy. And my favorite color was purple, and so was his. So he was gonna help me get a purple one just like him. And again, we were gonna be twins again, and it was gonna be awesome. Um, I looked up to this man my entire life. I wanted to be just like him and do everything with him. And then he was gone. Um, I didn't want to be an EMT anymore after that. I thought he's gone. How am I going to do this without him? Who's going to be there to help me study? Who's going to do my third rides with me? Who is I going to be able to experience this wonderful career that he has shown me? Who's I going to experience that with? Who is I going to share that with? Um, I realized I'd never be able to be his partner. That would that was a big thing that we had always talked about, was being his partner, and we were going to do it together. And I was never going to be able to have the chance to do that. And how was I going to live out my dream career without him? I didn't know how I was going to. So part of the writing on the screen right now is his obituary. Um, sorry, get emotional. Uh, when we had his funeral, I remember hearing all these great stories about him and how he was a fantastic medic, and he was so many people looked up to him as a medic. How he helped so many other people obtain their medic license. Many people talked about his love of Christmas and how he always played Christmas music the second it came on the radio during the Christmas season. He hung up lights in his ambulance during the Christmas season. I remember being told that whoever his partner was during the holiday season, they didn't have a choice in what was on the radio. It was going to be Christmas music, no matter what. I was told that by the time Christmas came, he always had like the Grinch of the station singing along with him. You did not have a choice but to enjoy that Christmas music. I remember looking down the hallway at the funeral home, and it was filled with people. Um, I remember when it was time for the eulogy at his funeral, because we were in the front row. I remember looking behind me, and there were so many people there that there weren't enough seats. There wasn't enough room for all these people that were there to celebrate him in his life. I remember thinking, you had all these people here for you. All of these people that you could have called, that would have picked up the phone, that would have talked to you. And why didn't you call any of them? Why there you had so many options and you didn't do that. But I didn't understand the stigma then. So that was really hard. So this post is from Facebook. Um, so it took me quite a few years to grieve my dad's death. Not only that, but I also had to grieve this dream career that we had together that was no longer something we could do together. I'd have to do it alone. So about 4 years after his death, I was ready. I said, I can do this, even though I'm not doing it with him, I can still do it. So I got a hold of his best friend. His name was Rob. He got me into his company's EMT class, same as what my dad did, 4 years prior. Just had to give them my name, and that was it. No interview, no nothing. I was on the list. And I remember struggling through the class and having to grieve my dad's death again. It brought all of this back up, that he wasn't there with me and I was doing it alone. I wasn't doing it with him. Um, I feared that I wouldn't be able to do it without him. This was something that we had planned to do together. Now I'm doing it by myself. And what if I can't do it by myself? But I found a mentor in his best friend, Rob. I was able to do my first third rides with Rob, which is really special. Um, we reminisced about memories of my dad. We joked about my dad always wearing purple and having all purple equipment. And I told him that I was going to carry that on. My stethoscope was going to be purple. My pulse ox was going to be purple. Anything I could, I was going to have purple. It was nice to find that enjoyment throughout school because I had Rob there with me. But it was still really hard knowing that it wasn't my dad there to help me when I struggled. It was Rob. Um, so I often post on Facebook as a way to talk to my dad. While I was getting ready for this webinar, I went through and I had found a post, that's what this is, on Facebook that I had posted on my dad's wall while I was struggling through school. So about a month after I got my EMT license, this is Rob. He committed suicide as well. So I love this picture of him because this just is his personality 100% with the dog in his coat. I love it. That's him 100%. His obituary is on the slide. So this was a heartbreaking discovery as I didn't have my dad to carry out my dream, but I had Rob and then I lost him too. So losing Rob and my dad, I knew I wanted to make a change. I knew that mental health was an issue and it was something that I want to change. I did not want other first responders to be gone too soon, but I wasn't quite sure how to go about making that change. So working in EMS, I very quickly realized the stigma that surrounds mental health for first responders and non-first responders. No one talks about struggling with having thoughts of hurting themselves. Everyone just keeps it silent and doesn't say anything. And the people who do end up speaking up are looked down upon and made fun of. I also saw first responders who were stigmatized when they had a bad call and needed help. There was and still is um, a generational curse within the first responder community that we should just move on to the next call, push your feelings aside, don't think about it, don't deal with it. So it's very much when you get off shift, drink if you need, otherwise, that's the job you signed up for. You chose to you chose to work in these conditions, and you need to just suck it up and deal with it. There is also a fear that if you do seek help, that you are admitting that you're weak, or that others, sorry, or that others will label you as weak or less than because you're asking for help. There's a fear that you'll lose your job or your ability to do your job. There's also a fear that just because you're taking it worse than your partner, that somehow makes you incapable of doing this job. There's a fear of negative professional consequences, like loss of standing or promotion potential if you do seek help. So aside from the stigma, there's multiple other barriers for first responders seeking help. Lack of knowledge of where and how to access mental health professionals. There's not really a whole lot of information that's given in EMT school when you're getting your license initially of where you could go if you struggle. Being able to attend these appointments, even if you can find somebody, being able to attend these appointments due to our work schedule and time constraints. It's a lot of 24 to 48 hour shifts, and those can vary, and late calls, and it's hard to say, yes, I'll be there at that appointment when you don't know if you're going to get a late call. It could be 1 minute before the end of your shift and you get a call and you're going. Finding a mental health professional that is culturally competent in first responder culture is also very hard for first responders who do seek help. So in January of 2020, I started school to become a paramedic. Uh, I was ready to continue and advance my education. I was excited to take this next step in my dream career, and then COVID-19 happened. Uh, when the pandemic hit, it rocked the whole world. We didn't know much about the illness, and a lot of first responders sacrificed to be able to be there for the communities that they served. I know I didn't see my kids for like 3 or 4 months when it happened, because I was afraid I was going to bring that home to them. I remember spending Easter over FaceTime with my kids over the phone, and it was heartbreaking, and it was so hard to see them playing and search for their Easter eggs. And I didn't know where the eggs were because I didn't help hide them. I wasn't there with them. But I also know that from the information we had at that time, I was making the best decision for them. I know quite a few first responders who did the same thing, and the ones that didn't have that option worried every single day that they would bring it home to their families. So the medical field was raved and praised for standing firm and fighting against the pandemic. But they didn't see the toll that it was taking on us. Being away from our families was hard, but also seeing the people of the communities that we serve being ravished by this illness. The pandemic did shed some light on the mental strain that first responders go through, but it also severely deepened the stigma as both pre-hospital and hospital providers were told, this is what you signed up for. Get out and do your job. I attended a first responder conference in New York City in 2002. Really cool. I love New York City. It's my favorite city. But it had first responders from all over the world. And I remember having a conversation with a New York City paramedic who stated that when the pandemic hit their city, they were running back-to-back cardiac arrests. He spoke about the strain on all of their providers, especially their brand new EMTs who now had to go to back-to-back CPRs. He spoke about these men and women who had just started their careers and now are dealing with some of the worst calls back to back without a break. This paramedic spoke about how these calls negatively impacted the most seasoned providers, let alone these brand new EMTs that are, they were essentially like thrown to the streets because there was no other choice. They needed people. The call volume was high. You had a license. They were going to send you out in a truck. And I know that this was the same in Detroit and all over the country, both in pre-hospital and hospital. So this right here is John. He was a 23-year-old New York City EMT. He died by suicide less than 3 months on the job after he, again, was thrown into the work, less than 3 months on the job. Again, it was right when the pandemic hit. He was found dead from a gunshot wound, discharged from a weapon that was registered to his retired NYPD dad. He was on the tactical response group. He was running in the area with the busiest call volume in the city. A few weeks before his death, he had told his colleagues that he did not like the job and that the death toll from COVID-19 was weighing heavily on him. So I think this is the EMT that medic was telling me about when I went to the conference. So I realized that these calls were starting to affect me negatively. I didn't want to end up with these traumas that I was silently holding on to, by the way, to force me to leave this life early. I didn't want to end up like my dad and Rob. I didn't want that. I wanted to stick around and watch my kids grow up. I wanted to be able to watch them graduate from school. I wanted to watch their own lives unfold and see what careers they were going to go into, if they were going to follow me or if they were going to venture out on their own. Um, I wanted to stick around long enough to be able to enjoy life again. So I decided to find a therapist to talk to. What I didn't know is how hard it would be to find somebody who understood what we were going through. Um, First responders have a very unique way of coping with what we do. How we talk about the calls, both good and bad. How we process the calls. We like to use dark humor for the good calls and the bad calls. Um, Outsiders look at the ways that we cope and they don't understand. So finding a therapist was very challenging for me. I realized that if I was having difficulty finding somebody to talk to, I'm sure a lot of other first responders were having a really hard time too. Um, so I decided to make a change. I wanted to be the change. So after losing my dad and his best friend to suicide, I gained a passion for mental health, but I wasn't sure what to do. So when I experienced my own mental health crisis and realized the struggles in finding the right person to talk to, I knew that there needed to be a change. I researched and realized to be a clinician, you need a social work degree. So while I was in the middle of my associate's degree, I changed majors completely. Um, so I graduated with my associate's degree at a community college. I transferred to Wayne State School of Social Work. I am in my senior year. I have this winter semester left, and then I'll have my bachelor's degree. I plan on I'll have my bachelor's degree after this semester. I plan on getting my master's degree though. So the 7 stages of grief model is based off the 5 stages of grief model. I have both of them on the screen. The 5 stages of grief model was initially theorized in 1969 by Swiss psychologist Elizabeth Rubler-Ross. Sure, I'm not pronouncing that right. She attempted to classify the different emotions and thoughts that people experience after losing someone that they love. Her original stages are those listed 2 through 6, with 1 and 7 added in recent years to strengthen the model. It is especially common to go up and down the scale around anniversaries and special dates. The important thing is that grief is not linear. You can move up and down that scale throughout the entire grieving process. And you also might not go through every stage or even have emotions that are listed. It is important to not avoid your grief. So pushing it down and in the back of your head and ignoring it might seem like it's helping, but often it just prolongs the pain. Instead of that, allow yourself to grieve and heal and work your way through the process because it's yours. So first responders are at a higher risk for mental health crisis. This is due for multitude of reasons. The most obvious is the type of calls that we experience. As first responders, we get to do some really cool stuff sometimes. But with those come very traumatic scenes. The number of traumatic calls that we have in a single shift are probably more than people see in their entire lifetime. And that's just one shift. With these shifts and the number of calls that we receive, we often don't have a lot of time to recover, if any at all. We're always told there's another call waiting for you. So first responders are a family, and as a family, we look out for each other. So some warning signs that you or someone you care about may be experiencing a mental health crisis, losing interest in daily activities, avoiding family and friends, lacking feelings or feeling indifferent, isolation or disconnection from others, feeling like you need alcohol or drugs to cope, nightmares or recurrent thoughts about certain calls, being easily frustrated or irritable, and sadness and depression. So some coping skills. I know we're super famous for our dark humor that we use to cope. Another one is getting adequate sleep, which I know it can be hard when you're working. Those 24-hour shifts, you might be up all night, with the calls back to back. But on your days off, try and practice this. A balanced nutrition, which again can be real hard when you're on shift. But this is much easier to maintain outside of work. Also, meal prepping can help you to have like a more balanced diet while you're at work, and you'll always have food in the cooler when you're running back-to-back calls. Regular exercise. When first responders at work, we get plenty of exercise, but outside of work, taking a walk is an easy way to do this. This can also transition into family time, which is important to spend time with family and friends. Taking time off to engage with social support, friends, hobbies. Big one is knowing that it's okay to draw a boundary and say no. So I know how nice overtime pay is on that paycheck, but saying no can give you that extra day to yourself. Breathing and relaxation techniques. So my favorite relaxation technique is the progressive breathing relaxation. Talk about lessening the stigma. That's why we're here. So we all know that just because something has been done a certain way for a long time does not mean that there's a better way. This has been proven by the changes that we see in protocols all the time that allow us to better help our patients. So just because there's a stigma right now surrounding mental health does not mean that there always has to be one. This is something we can actually change ourselves. We're in control of this. Normalizing talking about mental health, even if it's unrelated to the job. We all get stressed from time to time. We all feel overwhelmed both at work and outside of work. Talking about these struggles with those around you helps bring awareness to mental health. Someone who is struggling often feels like they're fighting it alone. So just knowing that you're not the only one that is facing this challenge can help. There are others who are struggling just as much as you. If you and your partner go on a call and it affects your partner more than it affects you, that's okay. That's normal. We all have different life experiences and we're going to react differently to things. The important thing is to be there for each other. So as I stated, we all struggle, and sometimes we need more help. So this happened to me in 2020. I was struggling with things related to the job and outside of the job. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and things became too much for me to handle. I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I was honest with her and told her how I was feeling and that I didn't know if I could keep myself safe. It was hard for me to admit that, but I knew that I didn't want to end up just like my dad and Robin, that I needed help. So I went to the ER and I put myself in an inpatient psychiatric facility. I remember my nurse at the ER was starting a line on me, and we were going through all the questions that they ask you at the ER. And it had came up that my dad had died from suicide. And I remember her looking at me and just saying, "You're Eric's daughter, aren't you?" I was super puzzled, because I didn't recognize this lady. But I said, "Yeah, I am." She then went on to tell me that she was his partner many, many years ago and that she was really saddened by his death. Um, and then she told me something that will stick with me for a long time. She just looked at me and she said, "Thank you for getting help." And I remember feeling so foolish for admitting that I needed help and then seeking that help. But after that comment, I knew that I did the right thing. The tech at the inpatient facility I went to remembered my name from dropping patients off to her. And she was also grateful that I was seeking the help versus the alternative. So some additional resources that first responders can find helpful are peer support groups. I know that in Northern Michigan, we have the Northwestern Peer Support Network. Frontline Strong Together has many resources for first responders and their families too. Both of these resources have culturally competent clinicians, which is very important for us. Critical incident stress management training is also a way that can help you and your coworkers. I love this little picture. It's important to take time for yourself and practice self-care. My big thing is you can't fill others' cups if yours is empty. Take the time you need for yourself, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. Get that time for yourself. So thanks everybody for listening to my story. Does anyone have questions?
Yes.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That way I can see everything.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, so go again, please add your questions to the chat and the Q&A. So I will go ahead and get started with questions. First, Ashley, thank you so much for sharing this. This is amazing. Your story is amazing. Your resiliency is amazing. My question for you that I think is important for first responders is you mentioned when you put up the stages of grief that not everybody feels all of the different stages, and it's important to understand that it can come and go in different ways. Do you feel like you went through all the stages of grief, and how is it getting to the place where you are finding acceptance? How was that process for you?
It took me quite a while. I know, like I said, it took me quite a few years to be able to go to EMT school. I know right after he died, I did not believe that he was gone. So he worked night shift. So I would just tell myself he was sleeping, and I didn't want to believe that he was gone. And his best friend actually helped me with that and said, "Hey, you have to feel these. He is gone. It's real. We have to work through this." So he really helped me with that. I feel like I re-went through that grief during EMT school. Um, During the anniversary of his death date, I kind of go up and down that scale a little too. Any special days really, that are related to him. I do go down that, but I feel like I'm at a place now to where I know that he's gone. That doesn't mean I forget about him, and that doesn't mean that I'm sad. I'm not sad that he's gone, and that doesn't mean I don't miss him, but it means that I've learned to live with his memory versus being angry, that he's not here.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay. All right. Let's see here. We have a thanks for sharing with three or four hearts. Yes. People are so happy to hear your story. So thank you for sharing and being there. The first question is, I am a therapist with an EMS background. How do I get added to your therapist list? And so I think this is probably for both groups because I know your peer support team has a group. Through FST5, you would just reach out to us and send us your information through FST5.org. You can find our email address on there. And so once you email us your information, we'll get back to you and start the vetting process. We do a short vetting process for our first responders to make sure that, or for our clinicians to make sure that they are culturally competent and have a good background with working with first responders and their families. So that's how we get you on our list. Kobe and Ashley, is there a process for getting on your peer support team list?
There is a process. We do an intake for everyone. So I just kind of asked Charles where he is from to see if he's within our Region 7 district. Zone 3. So
Zone 3.
He's already looked at Frontline site.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
I think you answered that for him for Frontline Strong.
Okay. Yep, I'll put it in the chat. Okay, Kobe, you want to give out the next question?
Yeah, I'm gonna do one that popped up on the Q&A from Judy. That is to you, Ashley, and she's asking, are you still in therapy?
I am still in therapy. I know that I have a lot of stuff that I would like to work through. Um, and I know that I can't do that by myself. Like I said, I can't fill others' cups if mine isn't full. And having that extra person to talk to a couple times a month, it helps me.
That is good. That's actually something we've hit on quite a few of our webinars and podcasts because I know I see one. It's you're gonna exercise your body, you need to exercise your mind and get used to relieving some of that stress we see. And I highly recommend it, especially for this job if you want to be able to retire healthy.
Yeah, mental health is the same as physical health. Like you go to a doctor at least once a year for a checkup for your physical health, and you should do that for your mental health too.
Do you suggest that for any administrative individuals on here that might have some sort of leadership in their department to establish that in their department? I know our department, that's in our policy, we have to see our work therapist once a year, but you don't see that a lot.
Yeah, I think some departments do require it, but it's not in all. I think it's far and few between departments that will require you to or require their first responders to check in with their therapist. And if they do, most likely it's their EAPs. Check in with the EAPs, see how things are, going in that space. But I am excited that I am learning from more peer support teams that they're kind of requiring that of the members that are on their peer support team to check in at least with the team clinician or checking in with the EAP just to kind of have that because not only are you guys going on the calls and doing the work, but you're also being the peer support for the department. And so the bigger your department is, that sometimes there's not a lot of peer support team members and that falls on just a few people. So I do like the fact that some of the peer support teams are bringing that in and adding that as a component to being a member of the team. So that's good to hear. Okay. All right. We had the next question it says, thank you and happy birthday. It says you said it was
Thank
difficult to find a
you.
clinician. It says you said it was difficult to find a clinician. How many did you interview? So like how many did you go to before you found one you liked?
So I went through 4 before I found one that was good enough. And I hate saying it like that, but they weren't entirely culturally competent in first responders. Um, but they were in the medical field. Um, also, so it was kind of it's better than nothing type of thing. But I still had a really hard time talking to them about the things that I had seen because they hadn't experienced that. I started talking about a call and they had to like stop me and they were like, I don't want to hear about this kid. I can't listen to this. And I ended up having to stop seeing that therapist because of that, because I was traumatizing them with my stories.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times from first responders that they find themselves having to take care of clinicians who aren't culturally competent, which is why it's important. I know, I think we've talked about this in previous webinars that we have a lot of great PTSD providers, trauma clinicians out there, but it is something different working solely with first responders, and you have to have that experience. You have to have a little bit of that background to be able to know how to understand dark humor, how to understand different schedules, the things that their families could be going through, how first responders deal with stigma, how their stigma is attached to them. So I think it's important to know that being a clinician is just not about like schooling or having that degree behind your name. You need to make sure that you are culturally competent, and we can help you do that. If you are interested in being a clinician who wants to work with first responders, we can get you that training. So just let us know at FST5. And the email address is info@fst5.org. Again, that's info at fst5.org. Okay, next question. I think we have, let's see. Okay. Do you want to go to different companies and spread awareness? I think it would be a good idea for first responders who may be scared to reach out.
I would love to be able to do that. Honestly, my dream is to work um, specifically with first responders, and with that is breaking that stigma of we all struggle. That's kind of why I shared my story too, is that I'm not somebody who's just, oh, I worked in EMS and I was completely fine, so I decided to go to school and be a therapist. It's no, this is a real issue. I struggled myself and it was hard, but it gets better. It will get better. And I think that's a big thing with mental health, is it's hard to look past those bad feelings and look to the brighter future. But that's where breaking the stigma also comes into play, is like talk about it.
Awesome. And I'll just piggyback off that question there. How did you get to the place where you were comfortable talking about it? Because you have a heavy story. Your story is very heavy, my dear. And you and I both, the first time we talked about it, we were both in tears. But and as many times as I said, you don't have to continue, you chose to continue. And so I think the expression of your vulnerability is so amazing, and the power that you hold when someone is able to see that can really change lives. So what brought you to this space? How did you get to wanting to talk about your experiences?
I wanted to make a difference. My thing that I like saying, I want I want kids to be able to run calls with their dads. I never got to do that, and I want others to be able to. And I have such a passion for mental health. And it started when with my dad and Rob, and then I went through a mental health crisis, and I wanted to make a difference. And if I knew that there needed to be a change, and I wanted to be that change. I know people say like one person can't make a difference, but they can. They really can. Like look at Kobe. He's got the peer support network. He's one person and he's made this huge difference in people. And I'm gonna do that too. I want others to know that this is a relatable topic. It's something that we all do, we all struggle, we all go through it, but it will get better. And the only way for people to understand that it is something that's real and it's not something that um, you see on movies is to talk about it. And if I can help just one person be able to watch their kids graduate or hold their grandbaby in their arms, then it's worth it. It's worth the struggle that I have when I share. Because don't get me wrong, it's not super easy. I get emotional and it is hard to share, but I know that it's important and I know that others matter, and that's why I do it.
Awesome. Amazing. Okay. Uh, let's see. I think we have another question. Yes, the email is info@fst5.org. And then, okay, so the last one was a comment. It says, "You are fabulous, Ashley. You're doing so much for others, but I am most happy that you are taking care of you." So
Thank you.
that's very awesome. Kobe and so this is a question for Kobe and Ashley. When it comes to first responders reaching out for peer support teams, what are to other peers? What are your suggestions in this area? Because when we're talking about stigma, asking for help and reaching out to anyone, and using Ashley's story, both Eric and Rob were really, they were best friends. They were the closest together and they still didn't come to each other, even being colleagues as well. So what are your suggestions, the both of you? What are your suggestions when it comes to peers reaching out to peers?
So mine is be that peer that someone's not afraid to ask. I don't really care about your thoughts on suicide or mental health because I mean, me and Ashley both have coworkers that they kind of deal with things the wrong way, but they also respect like someone that wants to get help or someone that needs a vent to them. And that's all having that open mind. It's not being that closed minded when someone does come to you. You're like, oh, that's your bad call. That's I mean, this is what you signed up for and stuff. That's closed minded, and that's something we still see to this day. And it's not good. You're like you're being that role model for them, and they might want to come to you and vent. And if that's what you have to say, you're gonna push them away and they might not reach out again. So my biggest thing is to be open-minded for when those peers do come to you. And as well, you should have the resources too.
Ashley?
So I'm gonna piggyback off what Kobe said. Just because this call is affecting that other person differently than infected you doesn't make them any less. It doesn't make you any more. We all have different life experiences and we're all gonna react differently to different calls. So don't belittle somebody for getting help. Just talk to them. Let them talk to you because a lot of peer support is listening. And it's not having all the answers. It's just having that ear to be there for somebody to be able to tell you how they feel. And I think resources is a big thing too. I know when I went to through EMT school, there was no, hey, here's where you can go for help. Here's what's covered by our company's insurance. I know I had a bad call and I reached out to the person that was supposed to be my peer support. And I got told, I don't know what to tell you. I just hope you don't have nightmares. And my big thing too is you don't have to have all the answers, but send them to somebody who can help them. Even if you're not the person that can, direct them where they should go because telling them the wrong thing is that's not good. That's not better. You don't have to have all the answers. Send them to somebody who can help them.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think just you reminded me of something when you said EMT school. That is huge. EMT school and paramedic school, we're missing the mark when we're talking about educating and getting these students that are going out there on these ride-alongs. And I know in my class, we've had several students that just had terrible traumatic calls, and they were students. And then going into their career, I know in our area, I do a lot of the classes for our medic students, and our team has been invited for EMT classes. But I mean, that's one program. How many other programs are there going without education and knowing the resources in the area? It's a huge gap that we're missing. And not to mention, I mean, last year, private EMS was hit hard with the amount of suicides, having the most in our state above fire and dispatchers. So we're missing a gap there. And I think education is probably one of the key things we need to hit on.
A lot of my experiences from working downstate in the in Detroit. I did Detroit 911. And then I moved up here and their mental health is much more open than it is downstate. I would love to be able to bring the atmosphere that Colby has created in northern Michigan and spread it throughout Michigan because I can't tell you, we had a crew that had two pediatric CPRs in a 12-hour shift, and no one even reached out to them. And that's the atmosphere that it is downstate. And I know that up here, even if with just one, the peer support team would have would have been reached out to. So that is something that I think needs to expand to.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, so to piggyback off that one of the answers that you guys gave was that you come to some people, there's some people who come to you and they're kind of like they're kind of the folks that are like, no, you just suck it up. You don't talk about your mental health, things like that. Um, how do you, that's one of the questions that I'm frequently asked when it comes to other first people who are on the peer support team. They say that they get that response from people so much that it makes them not want to kind of continue, not want to continue to talk to people, not want to kind of be helpful if they think that most of the people are kind of thinking like this. So, I mean, and we've actually had people come up to us in different conferences and kind of be like, oh, mental health, that's kind of a fluff thing. People aren't tough anymore. So we have some creative ways to deal with that. But how do you guys deal with that when it is actually someone that you work with that kind of feels that way?
Um, for me, I tell them we signed up to help people. We didn't sign up to be robots. We're all human. We all have emotions, and it's okay for us to have emotions. That's what makes us great providers.
That's great. That's amazing. Kobe, what about you? Anything special that you say other than,
I'm a little more blunt.
yeah, I was gonna say the blunt thing that I was thinking you're
Right.
saying. What would
Yeah.
you say in that space?
So, I mean, like kind of said in the beginning, like I will tell that individual, and I have a few coworkers that are kind of like that towards mental health, but now working with me, they know like they need to have an open mind if someone comes to them, and they have the resources, right? They come to me and I could get them resources, but in the beginning, I mean, they were, trying to be tough, and I was just pretty blunt with them and told them like, you might be the last phone call or the last contact that person has. So I'm telling you from experience, you don't want to go to a funeral that you might have had that last contact with and could have helped that individual. And that right there kind of opens their eyes, and they see it. Like I said, I tell them up front, I'm like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I don't care to change your attitude or your opinion on this. I just want you to be open minded when someone comes to you. So with responders, you got to be blunt with them sometimes.
Absolutely.
Well, the two options are if somebody comes to talk to you, the two options are you sit there and you listen to them talk, or they're gonna go home and they're not coming to work the next day. No one's ever gonna see them again. Like, which option? These are your two options. Which one do you want?
Yeah. These are great. Yeah, these are great ways to kind of help support first responders talking to other first responders about reaching out and getting help. I think there's one last comment for Ashley. And I think you may know this person. It says, your story is so inspiring. And from someone who got to witness this growth for you, I will never stop telling you how proud I am of you. And this comes from Crystal.
That is my best friend. We have been best friends for 17 plus years. She's always been there for me. So she was there for me when I got out of inpatient. She said, "We're together 24/7 now." I said, "Deal." So she's always been my big support and by my side.
Aw, thank you, Crystal, for joining and being the support for Ashley. You providing support brought her here to us today, so thank you so much.
You got to have those friends.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ashley, was there, um, do you remember your dad or Rob talking about if there was any like resources back then or anybody they would talk to?
Not that I can remember. I remember being at the station when I was a kid, and if you had a bad call, you kind of just went into the corner, hung out by yourself. Your truck would get cleaned up by somebody else, and then you'd go back to the next call. There really wasn't any that I can remember. Um, any real like true support. And grow as I got older into my teenage years, I don't remember my dad or Rob ever talking about um their bad calls and getting help for them. They would just talk about the bad calls.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think that's something we focus a lot on is bad calls. Like I could ask any responder right now, like, what's the worst call you had? And they'll think of like 10 of them. Then you turn around and say, what's your best call? And they'll sit there for a minute and try to think of one just because we were so trapped in the bad calls and that stuck with us that we forget about those good calls, which there truly is a lot. You have someone in respiratory distress and you get them breathing again, that's a good call.
Yeah.
I think that's a big way we can reduce the stigma of talking about mental health is we focus a lot, like you said, on the bad calls and how these bad calls are affecting you. We could also talk about the good calls that we remember, and those good calls still affect you. All the calls we go on will always affect us. It's just how they affect us.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today and telling your story and being a part of this. And I'm so happy because this is not our last time talking with you. You are going to soon be a part of our team. So we're super excited to have you. And of course, you're part of our Wayne State family. So we are so grateful and thankful for you guys. I do want to give a quick opportunity before we get off for Kobe and or Ashley to plug your peer support teams and how people can get in touch with you. And if there is a need or in the type of mutual aid that you guys give to other peer supports in your area.
You want me to do it, Kobe?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the peer support network, it's called the Northwestern Peer Support Network. The website is www.nmi, as in Northern Michigan, peernetwork.com. We help provide debriefings and peer support to all the disciplines that FST5 does too.
Yeah, and I put that link there for if anybody wants that. We also have funding for responders and their immediate family up to 500. So if you don't have insurance or a way to pay for any type of mental health assistance, that's what that fund's for. And it's in our link as well. So we don't want money to be the reason why you don't get help.
Yes. So we put the link to their peer support team in the chat. We also put the email for fst5.org if you need to reach out to us in the chat as well. So again, Ashley, thank you so much. We will have this recording up within the next 24 to 48 hours. We'd like to get the recording on there. So we will also post the recording on our website. But you can find that under our webinar section of the website. In addition, you'll be able to find that on our emails as well. Oh, okay. You know what? I'll go ahead and check and see what's going on there with the email. And then we will also want you to tune in to, because we're going to have 2 webinars this month. We really have a lot of people wanting to be a part of this webinar series, a lot of people wanting to be a part of telling their story, talking about mental health and behavioral health. And so there may be some times that we come to you twice in a month, which is super exciting for us because that means the work that we're doing with FST5, people are loving it, people are interested, and they want to help other first responders and their families, not only in the state of Michigan, but also for everyone who can see these webinars and hear our podcast. So on January 31st, Wednesday, January 31st at 7 p.m., we will be having another amazing speaker come on. And this webinar is titled How Life Continues as the Widow of a First Responder. So this one is a really good session that's coming up. It also talks a little bit about grief, but this person is actually going to give steps of how she and her children and her families got through working on getting through the pain of moving forward and moving on. And Ashley gave us a little bit of this today, but I think this is going to be kind of a different spin on it. We're super excited to have the speaker with us. So please join in with us January 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, special thanks to MyCal. They're the people who run our 24/7, 365 crisis and resource line. Again, that's 833-34-STRONG, 833-347-8766. And of course, you can always reach us at our website at fst5.org, www.fst5.org. Kobe, thank you. Ashley, thank you.
Thank you.
Same for, we will see you guys soon. Please, if you have any questions, comments, any other topics, or you would like to be a speaker, you can email us at the info email as well. I will see what's going on with our email, but the info at fst5.org is our email address. So please get in touch with us that way. Okay. Everyone have a good night. Thank you guys.